Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, or actually tomorrow, it'll be Poetry Thursday. I'm just recording a video ahead of time as I'm really busy with my job, so I don't really have time to record on Thursday. Lucas from the Bits of Lit will probably pipe in here and say it's Poetry Wednesday then, but don't listen to him. He's out of his element, and he cheats at chess. I can't prove that, but I know that he's doing it somehow. Anyway, it's a great day to talk about all the wonderful poetry that exists in the world. And today, I am not Mr. Nothing. I am Sebastian, the eulogizer, because I am still in the process of eulogizing my father throughout the month of September. I had said that I wanted to, speak about, my dad and what he meant to me, especially because he died last month. And I really wanted to, talk about that and share some poems that I found that made me think of him in some way, and that that I thought, were related to my relationship with him, whether it be good or bad. I just wanted to talk about some stuff, and it's really seemed to help. I'm probably not going to talk about that next week now. I had planned on it, but I think I'm done with this eulogizing. I feel like the last 4 weeks have been pretty heartfelt and meaningful on my part. And so I can just carry with me, whatever remaining emotions and stuff I have into the future. But I'll still probably definitely talk about my father as it pertains to any books that I've read. So one of the poems that I want to talk about today focuses on motorcycles. And it is called Tornado on Two Wheels by Gypsypashn, otherwise known as Betsy Lister. For those who don't know, Betsy Lister isn't really a poet. She does write poetry, and so I guess you could define her as a poet, but that's not her main, area of income. Like, you see a lot of poets who work in English departments as poets, or they write poetry and that's their main source of income. But for Betsy, or otherwise known as Gypsypashn, she is actually an insurance broker in Massachusetts, I think. And what she commonly writes is biker poetry on her blog. And so biker poetry or road poetry is a genre, sort of a micro genre of poetry that not a lot of people contribute to, but it exists. Essentially, motorcycle enthusiasts and bikers who are on the road, take out their pen and paper and begin to write their thoughts as they come to them about, what they see, and sometimes they turn it into poetry. They might not get it published too often, but that's the nature of being a biker. If you're like a true biker, at least, you're probably not going to, send your stuff to a publishing company. And so, there's not a lot known about Gypsypashn or Betsy Lister besides what the few news stories I found about her online, but she does write in this genre of poetry, and I've managed to find her blog, which I will link to you today, so you can read about her poetry and her baikus, which, as it turns out, are haikus written by bikers, which I think is pretty funny. And so you might be wondering, Sebastian, why are you talking about bikers all of a sudden? And that's related to, my father, because he was a motorcycle enthusiast. He loved his Harleys, and he had a biker gang that he rolled with. And I'll talk a little bit about that after I talk about the poem. But that's something that I want to get at today with the nature of being a biker and what that means. So without further ado, let's get to the poem. 4 minutes into this video, I'll read it, and then I'll provide a brief summary, and we'll move on from there. Tornado on Two Wheels by Gypsypashn. The air was hot and humid, the Avon sky eerie and electric, thunderous and umbrella-like, leaving me no safe haven. Hurricane winds whipped across my back, a hard-driven rain stung my face. I hunkered down, warm against her engine, behind the fairing, trying to shield myself from the elements, raised the throttle, ripped through the gears, and exclaimed, "Come on, girl, let's get home safe." She must have heard me, because she obliged. We roared up the road, rounded the last street corner, blowing debris rushing by us, climbed the driveway, rolled into the garage safe, and away from the storm. And so that was Tornado on Two Wheels by Gypsypashn. I think a common theme among bike poetry and one that you see here is that it's not, technically, significant or anything like that. You don't see the hallmarks of like school taught poetry and in Tornado on Two Wheels or in most biker poetry. And that makes sense because a lot of bikers, they don't go to college or they're not English majors or anything like that. And that's perfectly fine. I'm not one to judge that. But this poem isn't, significant in terms of its design or the way that she's talking, but it's easy to see what she's talking about and the experience of being a biker, of being in the hot air, and suddenly the weather turns for the worst, and you have to rush to get home because it's not safe to be in a rainstorm when you're on your motorcycle. That can be pretty dangerous. I do like how she talks about the bike as though the bike is another character, another important person, because for many bikers, like they develop I want to say a relationship, much like a cowboy had with their horse. At least that's how my dad talked about it a lot. She uses the word "she" to describe the biker. She says, "Come on, girl, let's get home safe. She must have heard me, because she obliged." And there you get the sort of anthropomorphic feel of this motorcycle, where it's like, we're in this together. Let us both get home safe. Can you help me? Because the motorcycle has to work perfectly to get home and avoid the storm. And then the end of the poem, which is like safe and away from the storm, you feel that the tension easing up, and the woo of significance, or whatever you call it, like the sigh of relief, where she's like, we're finally home. We don't have to worry anymore. My bike, my treasured prize, my most significant property, a piece of property, like, it's not going to be hurt. It's gonna stay safe, and that's how a lot of bikers are. Like they love their bike so dearly, and if it gets even a minor bit damaged, they get very frustrated. That's how my dad was. He was like, "Don't touch my bike," and we mostly stayed away from it because otherwise, he'd go out and wash it and tell us to get away, go play somewhere else. And so, this poem doesn't really speak to me in any sort of way. Like, I can't identify with the life of a biker, but it does make me think of my father, of seeing him around his motorcycle and knowing how he was and how he liked the Harley Davidson biker culture, because he had Harley Davidson t-shirts, he had tattoos, which is something you see in the biker lifestyle. He had collectibles from Daytona Bike Week. He always talked about going to Sturgis, but unfortunately he could never make it. He had all of this stuff associated with his motorcycle. And I knew, early on, this is something that my dad absolutely loved. I remember that he let me ride his motorcycle a few times when I was younger. And then, when he asked me again, when I was in high school, I would always be like, no. Because I was a little wary of that, because I had heard that the back of a motorcycle was referred to as the bitch seat. And so I didn't want to be seen on that kind of seat amongst my peers who would no doubt bully me in high school. And so, I do regret that, because, riding a motorcycle is cool. And I still would have had fun with my riding on the motorcycle with my dad. But unfortunately, I let my fears of being ridiculed by others get to me, which is reasonable for a high schooler, I guess. But seeing all that, and it just it reminds me that my dad had this completely separate life, because he was part of a biker gang, like not an actual gang, but he was friends with a bunch of other bikers, and they hung out, they rolled together pretty frequently before I was born. And there's so many pictures of my dad from before I was born where he's with his biker friends, just chilling, palling out, hanging out. And it's like, that's my dad's other life. There's the person who my dad was before I was born, and the person who my dad is after I was born, and who he became. And those are two different people from what I can tell. And it's like, I really wanted to know about the biker version of my dad. What was his life like? Who were his friends? Because I've heard stories about them, but I don't really know who they were. Like, there's so much about them, and like I really wanted to get to know that person. But unfortunately, it's too late now. And like, I think to some degree my dad was ashamed of that part of his life. Not all of it. Like, he enjoyed being a biker, but he was a bit of a troublemaker in his youth. He went to jail a couple times, got in trouble with the law, and like, it's completely different from the man who raised me, who told me not to do any of that. But it happened to him, and so I think to some degree he was ashamed of it. And so like, he didn't ever tell me about it. But I wouldn't have been like embarrassed about it. Like, I find it really cool that my dad is this completely different person and was in this biker culture thing. And like, I wanted to know more about that. But as often is the case, sometimes we lose entire pieces of people. People have extensive histories when we meet them. And like, even though my dad was my dad, like, there's still a lot he didn't tell to me, to my mom, to everyone. And that's how it goes in life. And I guess what I'm saying out there is like, that's probably going to be something you feel after a loved one dies. And like, you may want to know them. You may want resolution, or, to be able to find out more information about them. But I think that's a fool's errand, because you're never going to be able to find all of that. And an unyielding search for it will just make you sadder when you don't find it. So I think I'm content with what I know about my dad now, but I'm always happy when my brother shows me new photos that I might not have seen before, or that I'm rediscovering now. It really helps me, understand who my dad was, and grow to appreciate the memory of him all the more. Also, if you take anything away from this, it's that, biker culture is very interesting. Not the most cleanest and politically correct of cultures, but it is an interesting culture. And I didn't even know that they had their own poetry movement. So that's something interesting related to poetry. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on Tornado on Two Wheels by Gypsypashn. A pretty decent poem. Maybe not really much compared to the other poetry that I talk about, but still interesting. Still meaningful to me based on, my dad and everything that's been going on recently. I'm going to link to the poem and the Gypsypashn's website in the description. I hope you read it, and let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Let's have a discussion about biker poems and baikus of all things. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about biker poetry, as well as Poetry Thursday. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and bikerish travels. Farewell.